There's a fellow from Kentucky. He visited Alabama, maybe for the first time, and he ran into the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway. Now, if you're not familiar with that, it's this little waterway that some senator got the idea you could dredge, and then you could put a river barge on it, and you could go all the way from North Alabama all the way to the Gulf Coast. A man-made waterway to connect the shipping, probably of cotton and different things. And this fellow from Kentucky was fascinated by it. And somebody said, well, you know, you can take a river cruise. You can go from the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway in North Alabama all the way to the Gulf Coast, and it only costs you $10. The guy said, I don't believe that. He said, well, meet me here at this boat launch at midnight. Well, the old fellow showed up at midnight, gave the guy his $10. Somebody hit him in the back of the head with a baseball bat. A couple of days later, he woke up in the Gulf of Mexico floating on an inner tube. He looked around and said, I wonder if they're going to serve a meal on this cruise. A fella from Tennessee in another inner tube said they didn't last year. So sometimes you have to predict what's going to happen. Matthew chapter 16. Peter has confessed. Jesus has asked his disciples, hey, who do people say I am? Hey, some people think you're the resurrected personage of John the Baptizer. Other people said, people think you may be Elijah. The Jews had a real misunderstanding sometime of the messianic prophecies. They were waiting on a prophet, a priest, and then a king. Jesus is going to be all three. So they're looking for Elijah, then they're looking for a priest, and then they're looking for a king. And so a lot of times they would just assign these personages to the Messiah. And Jesus said, well, okay, that's what everybody else thinks. What do you think? And Peter makes that great confession. We believe that you are the Messiah. In Greek, he uses the word Christ. Christ in Greek is the same word as Messiah in Hebrew. They both mean anointed. They both mean the coming one. And Peter makes this confession. We believe you're the Messiah. We believe you're the one that God promised to Israel. And Jesus gives that great statement of, blessed are you, Simon. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. I say unto you that you're Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Then Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. He must suffer many things at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and then on the third day rise again. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, this will not happen to you. And Jesus turned and said to him, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block and an offense. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely the concerns of men. Peter can do the math. Unlike the fellow from Tennessee who took the river cruise twice, Peter can do the math. If they kill my teacher, they're going to kill me. Lord, you don't understand. I'm not going to let this happen to you. In fact, Peter is going to go from you don't need to die to I'll die for you to years later I'll die with you. But before he gets to that, Jesus rebukes him, said, look, you're thinking about human concerns, either because Peter thinks Jesus has this idea that he's going to be this messianic leader, he can't be crucified, or because Peter can do the math. And Peter recognizes, you know what? If they kill my teacher, they're going to kill me. And in a variation of this text that was read for us, Jesus said to his disciples, verse 24, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good is it for someone if he gains the whole world and loses their soul? What can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Jesus makes a distinction between your life and your soul. But he tells his disciples, he says, listen, you've got to understand this. If you're going to follow me, just like he tells this rich ruler, the same thing he's going to tell his disciples. In order to be my disciple, in order to follow me, in order to become an emulator of who I am in my teachings, you've got to be willing to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And what does it require? What does it take to take up your cross and follow me? If you talk in the world of crisis intervention or negotiation, oftentimes as a therapist and even as some of my work with police officers, I have to deal with people who are suicidal. And there's this measure you use when you talk about somebody who's thinking about self-murder. And the measure there is lethality of intent. How lethal is the intent? Now that's not something that's easily predictable, but there's some signs of it. How serious is this person about what's about to take place? You take a little girl who's 7 years old, and for whatever reason, she decides that, she's going to kill herself. It does happen at that early age. And she takes every baby aspirin in the cabinet. Now, will baby aspirin kill you? No. Like eating Skittles. You can get away with that. Versus a guy who calls the police, says he's suicidal, and then he stands on his front porch with a pistol and keeps the police at bay for 4 hours. Who has lethality of intent? Okay, a guy walking around with a pistol, all he's got to do is point it at the police and things will happen. 6.5 pounds of pressure or less, depending on your trigger, and that can happen. He's got more lethal means, but for 4 hours he's walked around on this porch and didn't do anything. In fact, one of my guys who's a sniper said this guy talked a lot about death till death showed up in the neighborhood. And as soon as the SWAT team showed up, the guy gave up. The little girl who ate the aspirin believed she would die. Lethality of intent. When we talk about denying ourselves and taking up our cross and following Jesus, there has to be a measure of lethality of intent. See, if you go to my truck and you look through the stuff that's in my truck, let's suppose you went to my truck and you opened up the toolbox in the back and you saw a fishing pole. Well, hey, Lonnie may try to fish while he's in Kentucky. Johnny LeMaster last night at supper said, hey, sometimes when you come to Kentucky, you need to bring your ropes. I want to rappel. I said, I got ropes in the truck, brother. I don't go anywhere without them. So if you open up the back of my truck and you see rope, hey, Lonnie may do some rope work. If you open my truck and heaven forbid you found golf clubs in it, you'd say, hey, Lonnie's going to go golfing. If you open my truck and you raise the lid and sitting in the back of that truck were 2 cross beams, he said, hey, Lonnie's got a cross. What's the purpose of carrying a cross? Somebody's going to die. Must understand that as Christians, when we make this confession of faith and when we say that we're followers of Jesus, there has to be some intentional, there has to be lethality of intent. That I am willing to lose my life. I'm willing to give my life up in order to follow Jesus. Intention is big in most everything we do. Kyle talked about yesterday, and it kind of flew over my head. He said, you have 5 pelicans sitting on a pier, and one decides to fly off. How many pelicans do you have left? Hey, well, you still have 5 because deciding to do something and doing something are different. Okay? And so when somebody says, yeah, I'm going to be a Christian, I'm gonna die to self, that decision is one thing, the action is another thing. I've got an acquaintance, I'd like to call him a friend, his name's Bobby Rivers. Bobby Rivers is a boxer. He runs a mixed martial arts gym in Mobile, Alabama. We met at a seminar years ago, and he follows me on Facebook, and he saw pictures of me bowfish. He said, man, I'd like to bowfish with you. I was actually down in Mobile one time and had the chance to take him out in the Gulf and shoot some stingrays with a bow. And he said, well, why don't you meet me at my gym? So I drove over to Mobile. His gym is an abandoned bank. They knocked the deadbolts or the locks out of the bank, and they chained the doors together. And he unlocks this door, and you go into this unair-conditioned old bank that they put these Walmart mats on, where they have boxing gloves, punching bags, and they fight. Bobby's got a broken nose. I don't think he's interested in anything. I know he has a little dog, because one time a big pit bull attacked his little dog. Bobby choked it out. I don't know who you know about that puts dogs to sleep, but that's Bobby Rivers. Bobby in his bad boy days, now we've taken Bobby from being a savage to just being an animal. But in his bad boy days, Bobby carried a mouthpiece in his pocket. Not in a case, just in his pocket full of lint. And if he were at a ball game, at a restaurant somewhere, and somebody got to talking smack, Bobby would just go, oh, all right then, and put that mouthpiece. You talk about a de-escalation tool. If you're talking to a guy with cauliflower ear and a broke nose, he pulls his mouthpiece out and sticks it in. Guess what his intention is? We finna strive, okay? We're going to fight right now. I don't know how many fights he's avoided just by putting his mouthpiece in. I brought my stuff, did you? That's intention. How do we prove that we have the intention to deny self and follow Christ? It's one thing to talk about something theoretically. It's another thing to be able to demonstrate. I learned to snowboard when I was 40. Probably not the greatest decision I ever made in my life. If you go to Colorado and you ask an 18-year-old to teach you to snowboard, you know what he'll do? He'll get on his snowboard, he'll do something, he'll come back and go, dude, just do that. Well, dude, I don't do that. You know, my blue jeans are older than you are, son. I can't do what you just did on that. The guy who taught me how to snowboard in July in a dorm lobby at Freed-Hardeman University. We were there at summer camp. He said, let me explain the mechanics of a snowboard. A snowboard works like a wing. If you stand on it and you put this toe in the snow and this heel in the snow, it'll turn that way. If you stand on it and you put this heel in the toe and this snow, it'll turn that way. And the faster you go, the more control you have. And whatever weight is forward, that side of the snowboard will come forward. So if you're standing on a snowboard and you're standing this way and you're going downhill and you put more weight on your back foot, for no reason at all, you'll just drift to that back foot. And when that edge catches, you're on the ground. Until you've had it explained to you what happens, you'll get on a snowboard and think you've had a stroke because you don't know how to stand up on the thing. I can ride a skateboard, I can water ski, I can wakeboard. But that snowboard, the rules are different. But when he explained the mechanism of how to drive the thing, I learned to do okay with it. Now, I can't grind a rail or run a half pipe or do any cool stuff like that. I just run down the mountain and hit ski bunnies. But other than that is all I do. Paul says if you want to understand what it is to be able to deny self, take up your cross, and follow, he gives the mechanics of it. Now, you've got to have the intention first. I'm going to make it a decision in my life that my life's no longer going to be about me. I'm going to forfeit it and let Christ live in it. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. In the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. What's the mechanics of that? How do you take that from being written on a page in the inspired word and put it to work in your marriage, in your community, where you work, and where you worship? Paul will do it in 3 sentences. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 3. I flipped those numbers. There's prescriptions and proscriptions. A prescription is what the doctor gives you and tells you to take. Take 2 of these every morning. A proscription is what the doctor says, hey, you need to quit doing that. I had an MRI done on my knee last week. Went in to see the doctor. He said, your knee is perfect. You have no tears, no pulls, no damages, no sprains, no arthritis. I said, then why does my knee hurt? He said, because you're old. And a knee your age doesn't need to run and jump. He just told me, don't do this anymore. Well, Paul's going to give prescriptions and proscriptions. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in lowliness of mind, consider others better than yourselves. And do not look only to your own interest, but look out for the interest of others. When you start talking about the theory of deny yourself, take up your cross and follow Jesus, there's got to be some intention with that. And the intention of that is, number one, we must eliminate selfishness. It's inherent in what Jesus tells the young rulers. It's inherent in what Jesus tells his disciples. You must deny yourself. Nothing we do as Christians, nothing we do as husbands, nothing we do as children, nothing we do as neighbors, nothing we do as congregants should be done because of our ambition being selfish. If I could only preach one time to one audience on one topic, I'd talk about selfishness. Selfishness is the common denominator behind all sin. James chapter 1 verse 13 says we're tempted by the things that we want. And it's not specifically what you want, but that we have the capacity to want, and our wants get weaponized against us and they lead us into temptation. James 3:16, and the numbers in our Bibles, those are just marker places. They're not inspired, but sometimes there's some interesting things. John 3:16 and James 3:16. John 3:16 is the ultimate selfless verse. For God so loved the world that he gave. James 3:16 says, where you have selfish ambition, every evil thing exists. You want to know how somebody can cheat on their wife? You want to know how somebody can steal from their neighbor? You want to know how somebody can murder somebody? You want to know how somebody can embezzle on their taxes? You want to know how somebody can get addicted to anything? All you've got to do is add a tablespoon of selfishness and you can explain every human action. I can't understand how my husband behaves that way. He's in a phase where his brain has turned off and he's selfish. He's self-absorbed and not other-aware. And that explains every malady, every maladaption, every bad behavior. The common denominator behind all sin is selfishness. And Paul says when you choose to act, when you make a decision, you got to ask yourself, am I doing this for me? Am I doing it because it's God's will, or am I doing it because of you? And intentional living means I've got to make a decision that what I choose to do, nothing can be done through selfish ambition. Number two, if you're going to take up your cross, you got to change the way you see yourself. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or vain conceit. This idea that I'm important, this idea that I'm special, this idea that I'm better than somebody else, this idea that I deserve, that wears me out. People stand up and say, I deserve this award, I deserve this trophy, I deserve this. I don't want what I deserve, people. Okay? I want the grace and mercy of God. But sometimes we inflate our own price tag. Sometimes we blow up who we are. And I understand there are smart, gifted, and talented people in this room. They're successful athletes. They're successful business people. They're successful academians. They're people who are successful in art. Everything you accomplish is on the back of a gift somebody gave you you didn't deserve. Period. Our daughter was fortunate enough to play college volleyball. She's 4'10" tall and played Division I volleyball. That's just a whole nother discussion. I took her for a drive when she was graduating high school, drove her out on Gurley Pike, a little country road in Gurley, Alabama, where we live. And I said, sweetheart, you may be the only Division I athlete to walk out of this school, but you're not the only Division I athlete they'll ever see at the university you're going to. They're lined up like the Stones are in town and somebody's waiting to take your position. And I know you've worked hard and you gave up some things and you've practiced and you've played volleyball nearly year-round for the last 4 years. But what did you do to deserve to have eyes that can even see a volleyball? What did you do to deserve to have legs that will stand and allow you to walk? What did you do to deserve to have hands that match your eye coordination so that you can track and stick your hands out? What did you do to deserve to have a heart that beats well enough that you can play athletic sports at an aerobic level? Now, I understand you worked hard, and I understand you practiced, and I understand you've given up stuff, but everything you've done up to this point is done on the back of a gift somebody gave you. You didn't do anything to get. You can walk, and you can talk, and you can see, and you can breathe. And that's everybody in this room. What did you do to deserve to be born in America? What did you do to deserve to be born in Southern America? Everything we do on the back of a gift somebody gave. And so for me to look at somebody and go, you don't know who I am. Anybody who's ever said that doesn't know who they are. That's just the bottom line. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition. Let nothing be done through vain conceit. In lowliness of mind, esteem others better than you. If I'm going to be able to say no to me, I can't be selfish. If I'm going to say no to me, I can't be conceited. And if I say no to me, I got to look at you with a different set of eyes. I am discovering, and it's one of my hobby kicks right now. I get on things and my mind won't turn them loose. I'm finding a principle in the Bible that I call the as-if principle. When I talk to people in marriages, I say, look, I understand things are difficult. I understand he's done some bad stuff. I understand that there's things that affect you in a way, and I don't understand why some things bother us and some things don't. But what would it look like if you treated your husband as if you forgave him? That's intentional living. Doesn't necessarily mean you forgive him. Doesn't necessarily mean you're over it. Doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't hurt. But if you just decide, hey, tomorrow when I get up, instead of trying to punish him for this thing that he doesn't understand how bad, what would it look like if I just treated him as if I forgave him? What would it look like if you intentionally treated somebody as if you respected them? What would it look like if you intentionally treated somebody as if you loved them? Just take, somebody who's been married 25 years and they're having difficulty connecting in their marriage because life happens and you have kids and mortgages and jobs. What would it look like if you treated this girl as if you were dating again? Remember the way you'd go out of your way and do inconvenient stuff when you were dating? I got to speak in Cloverdale, Indiana, the summer of 1984. I was living in a fellowship hall in Alexander City, Alabama. I was their youth minister. I drove up 65, almost an hour south of Indianapolis, to do this little gospel meeting. The elders at Alexander City said, and by the way, while you're out there running around, if you need to take a couple of days to see a certain girl that lives in Arkansas, because it's going to be Jackie's 17th birthday. Well, on my way home from Indianapolis, I made a 10-hour detour to see her on her birthday in a 68 Chevrolet Impala that had no air conditioning. We were dating. I was in love. I'd already decided if I ever go to Arkansas and leave, she'll go with me or I won't leave Arkansas again. I drove 10 hours out of my way to see her on her birthday. And I get aggravated when I sit down and she says, would you take the trash out? If I remembered what it was like as if we were dating, she wouldn't even have to ask me to take the trash out. I'd anticipate it. Treat others in lowliness of mind. Change my status. I'm going to be intentionally humble, and I'm going to treat you as if you're more important than me. What would happen in your life if you treated the people in your family as if they were most important? Or in your neighborhood, or in this congregation? You see, in order to die to myself, I can't be selfish. I can't be conceited, and I've got to treat you as if you are more important than me. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. In lowliness of mind, esteem others better than you. Do not look out only for your interest, but for the interest of others. That basically boils down to the idea of not what's good for me, but what's good for you and what's good for us. I can sit down with a couple and say, hey, tell me the story of you. And if I hear I, me, my, I know we're in trouble. And if I hear us, we, and our, I know we've got a good story coming. Churches who are dichotomous, us against them and us. Neighborhoods, communities, companies, management with their employees. Anytime I see that split and there's not an us-ness about us, we really don't understand sacrificial living. We don't understand intentional living. I got to hear Mariel Hemingway speak one time. That's the granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway. And when she was delivering her lecture, she just kind of stopped mid-sentence and asked everybody to spell 2 words. And she said, everybody here spell with me the word illness. And we did, I-L-L-N-E-S-S. And then she said, I want you to spell wellness, W-E-L-L-N-E-S-S. What's the difference in illness and wellness? I versus we. When it's about me and I'm selfish, we don't have a healthy relationship. We don't have a healthy congregation. We don't have a healthy neighborhood. We don't have a healthy sports team. But when it's we, what we are together, not just looking out for my interest, but the interest of others. Paul says, listen, if you're going to be intentional, if you're going to understand what it is to be like Christ, if you're going to understand how it is to deny self. Now we understand theoretically, I got to deny myself, take up my cross. This is what it looks like to be able to pick up a cross. You can't be selfish. You can't be conceited. You got to think other people are more important than you. And you've got to be willing to do what's in the best interest of a group, not just in your own interest. How do I know Paul's talking about cross? Listen to how he illustrates this. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. One version says, have the same mindset, have the same attitude, have the same intention as Christ. And he quotes what we think might have been a first century hymn. Who, being in the very nature God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and taking on the form of a bondservant and being found in human likeness, he came and made himself a humble servant and became obedient to death, even the death on the cross. How was Jesus able to die on a cross? Well, he understood that equality with God, his status as an eternal, immortal, infinite being, was not something that was inappropriate. I don't know if I can explain the Trinity to you. I've got a pretty finite mind. I'm Oxford educated, but it was Oxford, Alabama. And so it's just a real problem there. All right. You've got God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, and they're different, but they're one. And Jesus was one of the one. He's one with the one, and he's one of the one. Not 100% accurate, the best I can do. If I took a bottle of water that somebody's drinking and we set up here on the podium and said, hey, that's water. What's the chemical formula for water? H2O. If I take that water and I freeze it, 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it becomes a hydroxide. We call it ice. What's the chemical formula for ice? Well, that's H2O. If you take that water and you steam it up and it makes a vapor or a mist, what's the chemical formula for water vapor? Well, that's H2O. 100% water, 100% water, 100% water. Same thing, 3 distinct manifestations. Now, there's this goofy bunch of people who teach this thing called modalism, and they talk about the water, ice, and thing, but they say that God can only exist one place at one time in one form. That's just not true. I've been deer hunting enough and find a little creek. It's got water underneath the ice and ice on top of the water, and then there's mist coming off of the ice. I got steam, ice, and water all in one place at the same time. Water, water, water. You've got this eternal being that is Father, Son, and Spirit. In John 17, Jesus is in the garden talking to the Father about the Spirit. He is God. And if he's got it, there's no compunction, there's no inappropriateness for him to say, I am God. In fact, he'll say that. Read in the King James Version when they come to arrest him in the garden. And they say, who are you looking for? I'm looking for Jesus. In the King James Version it says, I am he. He is in italics. Every time you see italics in the King James Version, it's been added by the translators. What Jesus says, hey, who are you looking for? We're looking for Jesus. He says, I am. And they back up and fall to the ground because he's God. But as God, he came to the earth. And I don't want to be inappropriate. I don't want to be cavalier. I don't want you to think I'm being disrespectful. But when Jesus came to the earth, he could have been any kind of man he wanted to be. He could have had rock star status. He could say, hey, I'm going to do miracles at the Coliseum if y'all want to come. And there'd have been standing room only every night, every venue, every seat would have been filled. But there's this thing in the gospel called the messianic secret. Well, he'll tell the disciples, hey, don't tell anybody. He'll heal somebody and say, don't tell anybody what I've done to you. He'll leave a multitude of people. He'll go to the other side of a lake to hide. Jesus didn't come to be popular. He didn't come to be a rock star. Jesus could have been a multimillionaire. You know, he's tempted to turn stones into bread. Well, if you can turn stones into bread, you could turn stones into gold. He could make anything out of nothing. He could have been as wealthy as he wanted to be, but he tells his disciples, foxes have holes, birds have nests, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. When they come to arrest him, and Peter pulls out his sword and he's going to defend Jesus, Jesus looks at him and says, don't you understand I could have 72,000 angels? That's 12 legions of angels. We sing the song, he could have called 10,000 angels. We miss it by 62,000 angels. Jesus could have been the most powerful military leader in the world. In 2 Kings 19, one angel kills 185,000 people. If you take 185,000 and you extrapolate that by 72,000 angels, you understand the destructive potential Jesus had with his army? I made this statement in Tampa, Florida one time, and a guy walked out of the building with a visitor's card, and it looked like Wile E. Coyote had a hold of it. He said, when you said that about the 72,000 angels, I did little calculations. He said, if you have a 10-hour day and a kill ratio of 185,000 per, you can destroy today's world population in 3.36 hours. But Jesus didn't come as a rock star, he didn't come as an entrepreneur, and he didn't come as a conquering general. The Bible says he came as a bond servant. And a lot of times the Greek language is not as technically specific as we've been taught it is. It gives us nuances but doesn't teach specificity. But in this case, bondservant is doulos, not diakonoi. And doulos was a servant you could buy on the slave market. He was young, he was uneducated, he was inexpensive, relatively speaking, for servants. You could buy one for 30 pieces of silver. And when you brought him home with you, he'd wash people's feet. You want to understand how to take up your cross? Don't do anything selfish. Don't do anything conceited. Think about people being more important than you. Don't do things in your own interest, but in the interest of others. And adopt the mindset of Christ. Whatever status it is you think you have, whatever power it is you think you have, whatever accomplishments you step off that self-appointed throne, and the throne he stepped off of was God-appointed. He was God. And the King of all men became the servant. And he washed people's feet for a price tag of 30 pieces of silver. And then he let them murder him. That's what it takes to take up your cross and follow. That's what it takes to live the Christ life. That's what it takes to be a follower of Jesus. And if my master is a servant. Peter did the math. Hey, if they'll kill him, they'll kill me. Will you do the math? If your master is a servant, the greatest thing you could ever be is a servant. And when you intentionally become a servant in every walk of your life, you now know what it takes to deny self, take up the cross, and follow him.